So, Sundaram, it's wonderful to meet with you and speak with you online. I just wondered if you could tell me how you and your organisation have adapted to the COVID-19 crisis so far.
I was on my way to Singapore, and in Qatar, when I was at the airport, I realized that I couldn't enter Singapore, and I turned around via Italy, via Milan. I had headed back to New York, not knowing Italy was going through this intense phase of the virus, and so everything has been done via technology, using Zoom, FaceTime, and we realized in order to reach our client base and our audience, we had to ramp up our sort of the digital side of our story. And that's what we did. And we started creating these online viewing rooms or private rooms, and we started creating online exhibitions and reached out through this process. What happened is that what we didn't realize that the clients, for the first time, they were at home. The clients generally, the way the world worked out, they were traveling all the time, continuously traveling. Now that they were at home and had ample amount of time, they were happy to receive our emails and our online viewing rooms that we were presenting to them. And the response was very positive. That is completely new. So we have ramped it up, and we are presenting our exhibition purely online, and this has been a very, very positive, and the clients have really appreciated that because they needed a distraction, they needed to be engaged while they're completely isolated wherever they are, and we have a global client base, a mailing list, and so this was very effective.
Well, thank you, Sundaram. What do you think worked, and what didn't work so well, and how did you evaluate the difference?
So if you look at COVID means isolation. You're already, and if you're coming from the artist's perspective, and I feel that that isolation is being doubled up. And what I mean by that is the artists are producing amazing works, absolutely amazing works, but they're doing it in complete isolation. So they were already isolated in the beginning. Now they are being absolutely doubly isolated. So from every square inch of the work of art is being produced by the artist. So think about Jeff Koons having 100 assistants, or other artists having a huge atelier, and all these people completely empty. So what I'm trying to say is that when I was speaking with Hiroshi, and Hiroshi said that from grinding the paint, to stretching the canvas, to moving the canvas, to lighting it properly, to every aspect, square inch of the work was done by him. There wasn't anyone else. And so that is really, really profound in some sense, because generally you have some help. So the art being produced during COVID and during this period when you didn't have any help came out of the artist studio. And what is really, really important is that we were able to tell these stories to the clients because we had more time. We were telling the personal side of the stories of the artists. Where did they come from? Why? What was their struggle? What was the struggle about? Why? What was the motivation behind creating these works of art? And the clients and our audience were really engaged with that. And that was new to me. And artists, as you know, they set themselves up with a set of problems and go about solving that. And so they were really solving a lot of the problems that one faced in isolation. What do you do? And they were philosophical about it, and they were actually practical about it. How do you go about it? So you take that cue from the artists and you apply it to our world, which is where intermediaries, and we are trying to translate that and trying to present those ideas to the client. And the clients were very happy to read about it and hear about it. And we ramped up our relationship with them based on using Zoom. And what I mean by that, when I started the gallery, let's say 20 years ago, or even before that, when I was working for Pace Wildenstein, or I knew all my clients. I knew their children. I would go to their home. I would stay with them. We would go to their swimming pool. I would attend their wedding. That changed completely with all these art fairs and biennales and triennales and constant conference and moving around, continuously moving. And the clients were moving, so we lost touch. And it sort of, with this technology, with this platform, we were able to reconnect with them, and everything slowed down. And by slowing it down, we could see the hand of the artist, the process, what they were doing, that idea of haptic idea, which became very, very important. And it's very important to me, and that's what we like about the artists that we show. And so the adaptation was, how do you capture the spirit of that kind of introspective world and show it to and expose those ideas to the clients? And that became very important for us.
That's fascinating. So you're saying really that you are better able to tell the story, or let's say that the crisis, by putting artists in isolation, enabled them to sort of focus on their own processes because they had no one else to help them in that situation, and also enabled them to tell the stories both of their adaptation to the COVID crisis and of their pre-existing autobiographies.
That's right. That's exactly right. And what's important about that is, prior to that, the artists themselves are very busy. They're constantly producing more and more work, more and more exhibition, multiple galleries across the globe. They're traveling, they're meeting clients, and they would come back and produce these works and back again. It was a constantly being in a treadmill. So that equation changed. Once that equation changed, and everything slowed down and pared down and to its essence, with very minimal amount of resources, there's no team, there's no assistant, no one else to help you. You have to manage and create. And likewise, we had to do that on our own. We were isolated, we were not going to work, we were not meeting clients, no galleries, so we were doing it remotely. And remotely meant, how do we compile and create these stories? And the stories were, because we were being more thoughtful, we were not running around like a headless chicken, and we were being more introspective, and we were able to tell a better story. And better story means we were able to connect with the clients in a much more stronger and deeper sense. So we were serving the artists, and also we were serving the clients.
That's important. Can you think of any way, things that didn't work so well, or things that you tried that that you evaluated you probably shouldn't bother with again?
So the digital side has its limitation. To be in front of a work of art, that visceral connection, to smell that turpentine, so see the process of the artist and the mistakes, how he or she covered it up, or you can have the visual component, and maybe you can have the auditory component, but the other part, the smell, to sense all other senses were missing. That's a shortfall, and it can never be supplemented by the digital side of the story. And another part is that we started using 3D technology to capture, to walk our clients. When we mounted this exhibition, we had a 3D technology, and we were moving through the gallery space. That hasn't been refined. It hasn't come to a point where we feel comfortable, because the distortion of the image and the coloration was pronounced. And so those were the shortfalls. But the digital side of the story is only going to amplify and increase and get more refined. So we are very happy to have that. And otherwise, as we traveled, we participated about, let's say, 8 to 10 fairs a year. And that means far-flung countries, from Miami maybe to Korea to Singapore, and then to Australia. We participated in all these fairs. Our clients were coming from all these places. It's not physically possible to take all these artworks to each one of them, but as they got used to the idea of Zoom, they got used to the idea of technology and acceptance of that, acceleration of the digital world, and that became becoming the norm now for our clients. Then we were able to communicate and tell our stories, and which is our artist stories.
It's fascinatingly true that the crisis has indeed seemed in some ways to fulfill the promise of the technology that was held out many years ago. I remember you and I at Oxford were having conversations about the promise of these digital technologies, but old habits died hard, and to some extent the COVID crisis has indeed now opened up, those potentials which were always kind of partly used, but still people were traveling and insisting on the value of being really there at meetings and so on. But whilst the technology has limitations, you're indeed indicating that people can adapt.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the very nature of the world that we lived in was really the world of excess. Globalization was a world of excess. I'm talking purely in the context of the art world. Too many exhibitions, too many presentations, too many places to go. We traveled on the drop of an invitation. Constantly, day and night, 24/7, things were happening. That excess part, now COVID, post-COVID or during COVID, it feels it's a time to slow down. So from global, we became local. And localization, we can't travel because without the vaccine, we are unable to go to art fairs because just like being a community of churchgoers, we are a community of artgoers, right? We participated in this art fairs or a museum exhibition, and we celebrated. But the idea of a gathering is it's not possible. And that gathering, so what do you do? So the excessive part has been reduced down to absolutely a slower, thoughtful, and deeper interaction with people, one-to-one, and not too many hurly-burlynesses out the door. And how do we interact with one another? How do we come up and reach out? And hopefully we'll create a much more compassionate world and a thoughtful world, where we are thinking about some of the essential things, what's really important for us and for our future generation. And that's what the art world, and that's one of the reasons there's so much upheaval in the art world, and the world itself, whether you're talking in terms of racism, and talking in terms of gender bias, talking in terms of inequality of all kinds. And we have to tackle that. It cannot be a lip service anymore. If it's a lip service, people will know. It has to be authentic. That either we tackle it or we stop talking about it. And so that's really important.
So you wrote rather movingly, I think, on these subjects in an email that you circulated to your mailing list. And I'm just wondering, you said to me that you had some very interesting and heartfelt responses to that. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I sent out an email, essentially reflecting on the world that we are living in and what it meant to be in this COVID condition, isolated in your home, spending more time. And then some of the issues that I'm talking about right now, and when I reached out to my clients and our supporters, and phenomenal hundreds and hundreds of emails from major curators of major museums saying, we love what you've said, we always felt like that. So the idea of spirituality, idea of caring for one another, and this kind of craziness of the art world of running after brand names only, and expansion, continuous sense of expansion, no matter what, go big or go home. This idea, it cannot be sustained, and we're killing each other in the process. So some of these issues that I had raised, And other people have also raised this issue. I'm not the only one, but I felt that I needed to communicate this and express this. And so many people came up and said, we feel exactly what you're feeling. So we know that we are not alone. Other people are going through the same kind of mental state and needs to overhaul the situation that we have created for ourselves in the art world.
Sundaram, how do you envisage both the recovery period, hopefully over the next year or so, and the succeeding next 5 years? What do you anticipate happening then, and how do you think your organisation, Sundaram Tagore Gallery, will adapt?
So one part is that if the virus continues, right now the art world structures exist. And what I mean by that, galleries, brick and mortar galleries supported by the art fairs, people attending all these art fairs. Then you have museum presentation, museum shows, and you have art critics and curators and professors, and all the art sort of ecosystem exists. Now, if the virus continues, some of these structures will fall apart. That means if the virus continues, let's say we solve the problem by creating a vaccine very soon, then it'll fall back in its old structure and with a few modifications. What I mean by that is that I know from the gallery world, a lot of people are going online. They feel they don't need to have the brick and mortar structure. While COVID is going on, the whole world will change and we have to readapt. So that means we have to go back to the old world ways of dealing with people one-to-one. When I opened the gallery 20 plus years ago, I was bringing in a client, I would spend time with them one afternoon, we'll have a long exchange, a conversation, and by the end of the day, after lunch and maybe some coffees and some drink, they would buy a work of art. I think something akin to that will take place. But also you have technology to support it. Maybe we'll have a long distance conversation on Zoom with a client in London or in Sydney or some other countries. And then we'll have a longer conversation based on that. Then we have to provide the kind of services that we have to provide. That means they can buy a work of art, but they have the right to return it if they are not happy with it. Those kind of services have to come with it. Because it's hard to gauge when they haven't seen the work of art. So a lot of things will change and we have to adapt. We have to become more malleable, more flexible, and we have to change on a dime. And within that, in the artistic quest, I would say deeper, more meaningful, more spiritual ideas, and some of the ideas that has been sort of relegated to the kind of ideas of spirituality and ideas of beauty. Because the reason I'm saying that is when I was alone, I was able to go to a park with my dog, and the sunset and the trees sort of blowing in the wind, it was so beautiful. Why do we exist? All these things came up. Reading a poem had real meaning to us, which we didn't have that kind of time during pre-COVID. And during COVID, we had that time to connect deeply with a writer, an artist, our friends, or someone who meant something more, someone who was more meaningful to you, and that deeper connection. So hopefully, with the post-COVID, we'll have a deeper connection and a more meaningful art that'll come out of that.
Well, thank you very much. That's fascinating, and I think your analysis of the importance of meaning and of narrative as well, both in terms of the artist's own story and and the meaning of the work that they produce. I think that's going to be some very interesting transformations. What do you see any substitutes for the kind of social side that can be provided online? I mean, obviously we have the possibility to have online socializing of various kinds, but it perhaps doesn't have yet quite the same thrill as going to a cocktail party and an opening a gallery, a vernissage or something like that. Do you see any kind of substitutes or way of offering the more social side that is also associated with the art world?
No, I think we live in a period of isolation, and you've got to make the loneliness into something positive and something more richer by deeply diving within yourself and connecting with few people that you're able to through this digital media. And essentially, as long as the virus goes on, it's that part, that communal part of celebration and being in a cocktail party and exchanging a conversation, which we deeply and dearly miss. But I don't see how it can be replicated through. You can have Zoom meetings, but it's not the same, because we are getting overburdened by Zoom, and constantly people are reaching out the way we are reaching out to clients, constantly the online sort of bombardment.
Well, thank you very much, Sundaram, and long may your adaptations and your gallery prosper under these challenging new conditions. It's absolutely fascinating to learn of the way that narrative and meaning and depth will come out of this, in your view, and let's hope for some good to come out of the gloom of the situation. Thank you very much.
You said it beautifully, Marius, and thank you so much. Always a pleasure to connect with you, whether physically or long distance.
Indeed. And yes, my best wishes.